Welcome to the exercises click pick for the traditional track Basic Greek Verb. What we want to do in this is not only try out our wings with some actual forms, many of which are taken straight from the New Testament, but we also want to get a sense of how the process works. It's one thing to learn the theory, it's another thing to be able to recognize a form in an actual Greek text of the New Testament. So let's start with lege, and the perfectionists among us realize I've missed an acute out there. Lege. Lege. Now, there are two parts basically to being able to translate a verb form like lege. One is you have to know the word or else you can't come up with a definition. In these exercises throughout this journey of learning Greek, there are two ways that you will know the word. One is you'll have memorized vocabulary, and each lesson, each tutorial comes with vocabulary to learn. And there's a click pick just for learning vocabulary. So some of the words you'll know from that. Other words, even though this is the traditional track, I'm not just going to put words you know in the exercises, because it's very easy at the end of exercises, and you'll find this at the bottom of this web page that you're looking at right now. At the bottom of this web page, you'll find a number of vocabulary words that you need to know for the exercises. Now, I've started easy. This is lege. One of the vocabulary words you've already learned is Lego. So you should already know that this form that you're looking at is going to have to do something to do with saying. So one thing that you need to know to translate a Greek verb is you need to know what word you're looking at. The second thing you need to know, and this is where I'm going to have to be a little more helpful. The second thing is you need to know what form you're looking at. So I'm hoping that you already, because of this tutorial, know what a is. Remember? O, ace, a, men, te, si. O, ace, a, men, te, and u, 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 si. So you recognize this as the third person singular. O, ace, a. In fact, if you were on the other track, I would go ahead and give you a lot of cheats. Probably not for this, because you're supposed to know a. But third person singular means that the subject of this is going to be either a he, or a she, or an it. So lege translates as he says, could also mean she says, or it could also mean it says. And chances are there's going to be a word in the sentence or the context that'll tell you whether it's Jesus says, or Sally says, or Scripture says, or something like that. Let me do a little surgery on this form to help clarify how the process works. You can see I have taken out my scalpel, and I have divided the kind of stem of the word leg from the ending a. Leg is telling you what the word is. Lego, say. A is telling you that the subject is a he, a she, or an it. So you could give several answers, and they would all be correct. You could translate this as he says, or she says, or it says. And of course, if we had a context, you might just forget about the he and say Bob says, or forget about the she and say Mary says, or forget about the it and say Scripture says. So that's how the process works. Let's try some out. Now, you do not recognize this word. Even if you coughed over 99 cents and watched the vocabulary click pick, you don't know what Clio, which is what this word is, means. Now, Clio is not a high-frequency word in the New Testament. I'm not sure that I'll introduce it to any of your vocabulary. Even if you watch all of these click picks, I'm not sure that you will ever see Clio in any of those vocabulary lists. Maybe you will. That's not important. Anybody can look this up. You can go to Blue Letter Bible or to some online resource or get out a Strong's Concordance or an Englishman's Concordance. There are thousands of ways to look up Clio, which means to cry. That's easy. And at the bottom of this page, you'll see there are a little cheat sheet, little vocabulary cheat sheet. At the bottom of this page, you'll see that I define Clio as crying. What's more important is for you to know what to make of that ete on the end. Now let me do a little surgery on this. Now, I know that I said te is the ending. It's really much more important that you know te. Epsilon there in the te is kind of like a little cushion. It's like cartilage in between the bones to keep the word and the ending from scraping up against each other. There's a colorful picture. But, you know, let's go ahead and put it in the ending part, not get it too complicated. The cly part tells you cry. What does the eta part tells you? Well, you remember, o ase, men te. Ah, it's a second person plural. And that means that the subject is going to be a y'all, or a you plural. You, plural, cry. The context that I took this word from is where Jesus says, "Why are you crying? She's not dead." You see how you cry? It's actually a question. And we will introduce you to punctuation marks as the day moveth along. But not today. Can you do this one? Eke. I'll give you a second. Or pause it, actually. He has, she has, it has. Any one of those would be a fine translation. And if you actually had Jesus in the sentence, you could say Jesus has. Or if you had Mary, you could say Mary has. Or the Bible has, which there's not a word for Bible, there's a word for Scripture. Anyway, you get it. He has, she has, it has. Zetusin. Now, you don't know zeteo. It's not in your vocabulary that you've learned. However, I've gone ahead and written underneath it what you'll find at the bottom of this page. Zeteo is a word that means to seek. Now you know everything you need to know to translate this. You should recognize the usi ending on the end. What's that nu at the end? It's not a V. What's the N? What's the nu at the end? It's a movable nu. It means absolutely nothing. In fact, just because we can, let's throw it away. It would mean exactly the same thing. Oase, mente, and usi. Third person plural. So I'm going to stick the word they in front of it. They seek is a fine translation for this. By the way, I might as well tell you that the present tense, which is what we're doing, you didn't know it, but everything that we're doing is in the present tense. I seek. It can be translated actually in more than one way. It can be translated I seek, which is kind of the beginning translation, but it can also mean I am seeking, have a kind of a continuous flavor to it, or I do seek, kind of a emphatic flavor to it. More than one way to skin a Greek verb in the present tense. Let's do a few more. The plot thickens. What is this thing? Now let's say that I hadn't been merciful to you and kind of given you a hint at the bottom of this page what word this is. You might have said, I know the men, oase, men. Ah, it's first person plural. I'm going to stick a, that's right, a we in front of it. But what's S? S, I mean, I looked through all my vocabulary that I'm supposed to have learned. I mean, I've only had 8 words. The only thing that comes anywhere close is a me, which means I am. But how do you get from a me to S men? I mean, it doesn't look right. And it's not in any of the words he put at the bottom of the page. Has he messed up? He forgot to put this word that I needed? Well, actually, I've given you a hint at the bottom that this is actually a form of a me. This brings us to a very important principle. In Greek, as in any language, things get really mangled. It's like someone put plastic and put it in a microwave for a minute or two. Things melt, they mangle. when you come across a word like S-men, you try your best. You go to the dictionary. You look for E words, epsilon words. You try to find something that comes close. And you do your best shot. Now, I'm going to give you a lot of helps in this process. And you're going to have to memorize a lot of irregular forms. There are some things you just have to commit brain cells to. They don't make sense. You just have to memorize it. Like with this one. This one actually, both were, a me, the principal form begins with an epsilon, and so does S-men, this particular form. So you put it together, you've got men, O-ace, a, men, that's first person plural, we. And then it's a me, so it's we am. Well, we am doesn't make much sense. You're going to have to use common sense. We am? No, we are. And so S-men translates as we are. Eventually, not this time, but eventually you're going to just have to commit the forms of a me to memory. A me means I am. A means you are. Estin is he, she, or it is. Esmen, este, ac. Esmen means we are. You're just going to have to memorize it eventually. Sorry, that's language for you. And so we want to conclude, we want to bring very quickly to a close these exercises. Let's do kathude. What is kathude? Now here's an example of where, look at those letters, kathud. I don't know what that means. Well, that's fine. You're not going to know a lot of things. You know the ending, though. O, ace, a, third person singular. So you know that the subject of this is going to be a he, a she, or an it. This actually comes from Mark 5, where Jesus sleeps, which brings me to the second point. At the bottom of the page, you see that the word kathudo means I sleep. Don't worry about, I don't recognize it. Don't panic. Panicking is the worst thing to do. Take a deep breath, and then realize that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Just look it up in the dictionary. So there's a lot of letters. Kappa, alpha, theta, epsilon, upsilon, delta. Who cares? It means sleep, and you can look it up. So you take the he, she, or it from the A, you add it to the sleep, and you've got he sleeps, she sleeps, or it sleeps. Jesus sleeps in this case. Let's combine it just to close out this pick. Kathude. Okay, what does it mean? Pause it if you need to. He does not sleep, or she does not sleep, or it does not sleep. Here's one my students might resonate with. Lege kai kathudo. He speaks, he says, and I sleep. You see how it goes together? The A on lege tells me it's a he, a she, or an it says, and then kathudo, the omega, tells you it's an I sleep. So, try the exercises at the bottom of this page and see how you do. I wish you well.